The most dangerous secrets of the Cold War weren't stored in Moscow, or Washington, or inside any classified vault carved beneath a military base. Some of them were buried in places where no one would ever think to look. Places like Arizona. Quiet, harmless, empty, or so everyone believed. Our story begins with a paradox, one so impossible, so contradictory, that even today neither Russia nor the United States has ever offered an explanation. Because in the middle of the Arizona desert, beneath American soil, beneath federal land, and beneath thousands of hours of geological survey data, there exists a perfectly engineered Soviet listening dome, a Cold War surveillance structure designed to intercept long-range acoustic signals. A dome that should not exist there, should not have been built there, should not even be possible to construct there without the US finding out. But it's real, it's intact, and worst of all, it's still active. The paradox started showing itself long before anyone knew what it meant. Throughout the 1980s, locals across the Coconino Plateau kept reporting a strange phenomenon, a deep, bone-level vibration that pulsed through the ground at night. Not noise, not sound. A vibration, as if something heavy beneath the desert floor was slowly powering up. What made it disturbing wasn't the vibration itself, but its timing. It always began at 02:13 a.m. It always ended at 02:21 a.m. And it repeated with the consistency of a machine following an instruction written decades earlier. Park rangers dismissed it. Geologists ignored it. The military denied everything. But one morning, without warning, the vibration didn't happen. The desert turned silent. That silence triggered a routine geological mapping expedition, the kind sent out whenever seismic readings shift unexpectedly. 3 researchers drove out with standard equipment: radio scanners, compasses, ground-penetrating radar. None of it worked. Devices flickered and died as they entered a specific ridge zone. Compasses rotated in slow, steady circles. Radars returned readings of a smooth, non-mineral mass, a shape too uniform to be natural. When the lead researcher dug a small trench, sand poured aside and revealed something metallic, something curved, something cold, even in the heat. Then came the paint, dull, faded, but unmistakable, a dark red Soviet hammer and sickle, stenciled in the industrial pattern used by USSR Engineering Division 4 during the 1960s. There was only one possible explanation, and it didn't make sense in any timeline. A Soviet structure, constructed in Arizona, with no historical record, no diplomatic incident, no military breach, no satellite evidence, no Cold War intelligence file showing Soviet presence anywhere even close to this region. The team barely got 2 photographs before unmarked trucks rolled in, escorted by plainclothesmen who spoke in short, clipped orders. The researchers were removed, their equipment seized, the area restricted, the discovery buried, literally and politically. But the paradox only grew. 3 days later, the nighttime vibration returned, stronger and clearer, as if whatever was beneath the ground had activated again, responding to the disturbance above it. The U.S. government's internal communications from that era, heavily redacted but partially released decades later, reveal just one chilling note written by a U.S. Air Force intelligence officer. If the Soviets built this, we never saw them come in. If we built it, no one ever admitted it. That contradiction has haunted investigators ever since. And yet, the dome received no further attention until 30 years later, when 2 independent Cold War analysts, Mason Hale and Dr. Adrian Holloway, began studying abnormal signal patterns across the American Southwest. They weren't searching for buried structures. They were tracking Cold War echoes, leftover frequencies emitted by forgotten test facilities. Then, one night, every device they carried erupted with the same signal at once. Not an American signature, not a random frequency. A precise Soviet acoustic signature from 1971, from a listening dome known in declassified Russian files as Object 17, origin point of the signal, northern Arizona desert. Strength, active, duration, 8 minutes, the exact time window of the old nightly vibration. But the real shock came when they traced the signal to its source on satellite topography. The dome wasn't buried where the original survey team had found it. It wasn't even in the same valley. It had shifted. Its signature had moved 13 kilometers southeast. Something, or someone, had relocated the entrance. Not excavated, not rebuilt, relocated. And whatever had done it hadn't stopped. As Hale and Holloway prepared to investigate, one more detail emerged, the kind that turns an impossible mystery into a terrifying one. Inside the new location's seismic profile was a heartbeat-like pulse, weak, controlled, mechanical, not random, not geological, not environmental. A Cold War machine buried beneath American soil was still running on instructions that no nation claims ownership of. And the desert was starting to respond. The dome has moved. The signal has awakened. Something deliberate is operating beneath Arizona. They say the desert keeps its own secrets, buried deep, scorched quiet, untouched for decades. But some secrets refuse to stay dead. And that was the paradox the Arizona investigation team faced in 1979. A signal repeating from a facility that was officially decommissioned, yet operating with the precision of an active Soviet command post. A dome that should have been empty, yet was generating energy spikes measurable from orbit. A Soviet installation located on U.S. soil, but one that neither nation publicly admitted existed. Every reading the analysts looked at felt like a contradiction. Every new scan only raised more questions. Every anomaly pointed to one impossible truth. Something inside that dome was still running, but no one knew who was running it or why. The first Descent Colonel Andrew Foster, former NORAD systems officer, was the first man assigned to lead a physical inspection. He was chosen not because he volunteered, but because he understood Soviet signal architecture better than most living Americans, and because he was stubborn enough to walk into the desert alone, if ordered. Before sunrise, Foster and a 4-man specialist unit flew into the restricted sector under radio blackout. The transport plane didn't land on a runway, just a flat strip of desert cleared decades earlier. The landing was rough, as if the ground itself didn't want them there. The dome was visible miles away, not towering, not grand, just a smooth, half-buried sphere covered in sand and stone, like something the earth tried to swallow. The closer they got, the stranger it looked. There were no seams, no hinges, no access locks, only a single reinforced maintenance hatch welded shut from the outside. Whoever closed it wanted it to stay closed. Foster took a breath. "This place shouldn't exist," he muttered. No one disagreed. The impossible power signature. Before attempting entry, Technician Riley set up a portable spectroanalyzer, an advanced Cold War-era device capable of reading deep surface electrical currents. The machine hummed, then flickered violently. Foster frowned. "What is that frequency? That's not American. That's a Soviet military cadence." Riley's voice trembled. "Sir, it's not just Soviet. It's synchronized, perfectly, like it's waiting for a response." That didn't make sense. The dome had been built in 1962. The Soviets abandoned the entire deep listening network in 1969. Every transmitter known to exist was dismantled or relocated. So how could a sealed, buried dome be transmitting a signal pattern updated to modern Soviet encryption standards? Foster tightened his grip on his rifle. "Run it again." They did. Same result. Perfect synchronization with a system that, officially, was dead. As if the dome wasn't abandoned, but active. As if it was still receiving instructions from somewhere. Or someone. The hatch. The team spent 2 hours cutting through the welded maintenance hatch. Sparks lit up the desert soil. The metal smelled burnt, almost chemical. When they finally pushed the hatch open, a wave of cold air swept out. Unnatural cold, like the inside of a freezer. Underground installations usually ran hot. This one felt preserved. Their flashlight beams slid down a long metallic tunnel, descending into darkness. No dust, no debris, no signs of rodents or desert insects. Just silence. Riley exhaled. "Sir, who the hell maintains a sealed structure for 10 years? Foster didn't answer, because he didn't have an answer. They began their descent. The dome interior. The stairs spiraled down deeper than any of the blueprints suggested, far deeper than a simple listening post should go. They walked for minutes that felt like hours. Finally, the stairs ended at a corridor lined with polished steel. Too pristine, too intact. Soviet facilities this old were supposed to be corroded, rusted, collapsing. But this place looked preserved, as if someone cleaned it. Then they reached the first chamber. Riley froze. The walls were covered in Soviet symbols, but the paint was bright, unweathered, freshly preserved. A console sat at the center of the room, lights blinking in slow, rhythmic pulses. Foster leaned in. No dust, no corrosion, no decay. He swallowed. "This equipment is alive." The console emitted a soft tone, then another, then a structured sequence. A handshake request. Something was trying to connect. Riley whispered, "Sir, that's a modern transmission channel. This wasn't built in the 60s. Someone upgraded this recently." Foster stared at the console. "This dome is active, and someone knew we'd find it." The lights flickered. A slow, rising hum vibrated through the floor. The facility was waking up. Riley shouted, "Sir, pressure change detected. Something's opening deeper inside." Foster raised his rifle. "What's opening?" But before anyone could answer, a deep metallic groan echoed through the chamber, like a massive door shifting somewhere in the darkness below them. A door no one had touched. A door they didn't know existed. A door that should not have opened on its own. Foster whispered, "Who opened that? If we're the only ones here." The lights went out. The darkness swallowed them. Only the soft hum of the dome remained, a rhythmic vibration that seemed to pulse with purpose, as if it had been waiting decades for intruders. Foster adjusted his flashlight, the beam slicing through the corridor. Riley followed, stepping cautiously over steel grates that barely creaked underfoot. Every sound echoed unnaturally, magnified by the massive, empty chamber. And then it hit them, the first paradox within the paradox. The equipment wasn't just alive, it was communicating. Signals from the impossible. The central console's blinking lights formed a pattern, complex, structured, and undeniably encrypted. Foster recognized elements of Soviet encryption used for intercontinental missile warning systems. But there was something impossible. Some of the signals contained frequencies invented decades after the Cold War ended. Riley's voice trembled. This is impossible. These codes didn't exist until the 2010s. Foster ran a hand down his face. The dome is decades older than the encryption it's emitting, yet it's actively generating it. That's the paradox we're chasing. The signal seemed almost intelligent, reactive. As they moved further into the chamber, the frequency adjusted, a soft modulation rising and falling with their footsteps. It was as if the structure could detect them. A dome built to listen had learned to respond. Deeper into the heart. The corridor descended into a central chamber. Here, the engineer's craftsmanship became unmistakable. Walls were polished metal, perfectly cylindrical. Red Cyrillic markings glimmered faintly under their flashlight. Rows of machinery lined the perimeter, spinning silently, awaiting commands long since thought obsolete. Riley touched one of the consoles, startled. "Sir, the temperature is dropping rapidly. It's artificial, like it's self-regulating." Foster glanced around. Every Cold War base he'd known aged naturally. Rust, dust, decay. Not here. The dome appeared maintained. Somehow, some system kept it active, protected. And that was the deeper paradox. Something had been sustaining the dome for decades, yet no one claimed responsibility. The first door. At the far end of the chamber, a massive steel hatch sat flush with the floor, hidden behind a maintenance panel. It was slightly ajar. The groaning sound from Part 2 had come from this very door. Foster's heart raced. Whatever's down there. It's the source of the signal. Riley shone his flashlight into the opening. The stairs descended further, steeper, darker. A faint red glow pulsed from below, synchronized with the main dome's hum. They exchanged glances. "Ready?" Foster whispered. No one answered. They had no choice. The inner chamber. The staircase led to a circular chamber, unlike anything Foster had imagined. At its center was a massive spherical object. A second dome nested inside the first, perfectly symmetrical, painted dark gray, with engraved Cyrillic letters partially illuminated by flickering emergency lights. It appeared operational. The surface vibrated faintly, resonating with the hum from the upper chamber. Panels along the walls flickered, displaying a grid of unknown symbols, coordinates, frequencies, and timestamps spanning decades. Hale and Holloway's earlier research came flooding back. The dome wasn't just a listening station. It was a tracking system, monitoring American missile tests, radio transmissions, and even civilian radar signals. But the latest readings? They weren't Cold War era. They were modern. Foster swallowed. This dome has been tracking signals for decades, and somehow adapted them to today. The team realized the horrifying implication. Someone, somewhere, is keeping it active. Not the Soviets. Not the Americans. The room comes alive. Suddenly, the red glow intensified. Machines whirred. Fans spun. Lights blinked faster. The dome seemed to respond to their presence. Riley yelped as the temperature dropped further. Icy air swirling in a vortex-like pattern. The sphere's surface began to emit a low-frequency pulse, synchronized with the hum. The sound penetrated bone, vibrating every nerve ending. Foster felt it resonate through the rifle in his hands. Then came a visual anomaly. A series of holographic-like projections flickered across the chamber. Maps, schematics, diagrams of unknown underground facilities, and cryptic numeric codes. Riley whispered, "Sir, these aren't stored here. They're being transmitted into the dome as we speak. Someone is feeding it data right now." Foster's mind raced. Someone is still using it. The second paradox. The paradox expanded. This wasn't just a relic. This wasn't a relic being preserved. This was an operational Cold War weapon, buried under U.S. soil, decades after its creators abandoned it, now integrated with modern systems. And yet, no nation admits control. Who rebuilt it? Why? And how did it survive for decades without detection? Foster realized the stakes. If the dome could self-update, self-monitor, and respond to intruders, it could be more dangerous than any missile silo. And then, the unexpected happened. A low mechanical roar filled the chamber. The floor trembled. The inner dome shifted slightly, and a second hatch on the opposite side of the room began to slide open, revealing an unseen network of tunnels extending far beneath the desert, far deeper than any maps suggested. Foster froze. This is bigger than we thought. The hum intensified. The red glow bathed the walls, and from the depths of the unknown tunnels, something moved. The inner tunnels yawned before them, black and uninviting. The team had descended deeper than any Cold War map had ever suggested. Beneath the first dome, beneath the second. Every step felt like trespassing into a timeline erased from history. The paradox remained. How could this Soviet facility exist here, fully operational, without leaving a trace for decades? Every logical explanation crumbled under the weight of observation. Yet here they were, inside a structure defying every rule of war, engineering, and geography. The operators revealed. Foster signaled for silence as a faint, rhythmic sound emerged from the depths, metallic, deliberate, like machinery walking. Then came movement, shadows separating from the darkness. Figures stepped forward. Not soldiers, not civilians, not anything recognizable from US or Soviet records. They wore fatigues stitched with no national insignia, carrying tools designed for delicate operations. Scanners, consoles, maintenance devices. They moved in silence, appearing more like caretakers than operators, attending to machines as if performing a ritual older than memory. Riley whispered, "Sir." "Who are they?" Foster shook his head, realizing the chilling truth. These were the hidden operators, the unknown custodians of a Cold War relic, still active under American soil. No nation claimed them. No agency admitted they existed. And yet, they maintained the dome, updated the signals, monitored the skies, and responded to intrusions as if the structure itself were alive. The paradox expands. Every paradox they had encountered now compounded into one impossible question. Why? Why build a Soviet listening post inside the US? Why allow it to remain active decades after the Cold War? Who was feeding it modern signals, modern encryption codes? Why remain invisible to every satellite, every reconnaissance mission? Hale and Holloway's earlier research provided clues. These operators were self-replicating, trained in generational cycles. Every few years, new members would take over, preserving the dome and maintaining operational secrecy. "This is evolution," Foster muttered. "A Cold War system that didn't end. It adapted, survived, outlived its creators. It was more than a listening dome. It was a self-sustaining paradox, a war machine that had transcended ownership. Deeper secrets." As they moved further into the tunnels, they discovered maintenance logs carved into metal plates, dates spanning 1962 to 2025. Every operation, every calibration meticulously documented by the invisible operators. One entry stood out: June 14, 2019, frequency update complete, awaiting next activation window. The dome was still a priority, still monitored, still receiving instructions. Riley tapped a console. "Sir, these are coordinates, facilities across the US, Europe, and Russia. This dome isn't isolated. It's part of a network." The team froze. The paradox now had a new layer. The dome wasn't just listening. It was connected, part of a global Cold War infrastructure, still functioning in secret. The hum intensifies. The dome's hum grew louder, vibrating through every bone. The inner chamber's lights flickered with synchronized precision. Then, the second dome, the inner core, rotated slightly, aligning with the symbols on the walls. It was alive. It was aware. Foster stepped forward cautiously. "Riley, we need to record everything. No assumptions. This facility, it's rewriting history." They began documenting, photographing, scanning, but the hidden operators never reacted. It was as if they expected the team, as if the dome itself had drawn them in. Then, the impossible happened. A hidden panel slid open behind the inner dome. A stairwell spiraled even deeper, into darkness that radiated cold, metallic energy. The operators glanced at each other and silently descended. Foster realized this was the heart of the paradox. The structure was not dormant, not abandoned, not under human control alone. It was autonomous, preserved by a shadow network of operators, yet designed to function decades beyond its creators' lifetimes. Foster whispered into his recorder. This facility, it survived the Cold War. It survived the collapse of the USSR. It survived every inspection and every human assumption about secrecy. And now, it's awake. It's fully operational. And someone, something, is waiting for us in the next chamber. A low metallic thrum echoed from below, the deepest level of the tunnels. Lights flickered, shadows moved, and the hum intensified until it became a living pulse, vibrating with intelligence. Foster turned to Riley. "Whatever is down there, it is not just a dome. It is history alive, and it knows we are here." The camera would cut to black, leaving the audience on the edge of terror and awe. A Cold War facility, decades old, fully autonomous, maintained by unknown operators, still active and connected to global signals, defying all logic, and now fully aware of the intruders.